The following is a message from a spirit in the spirit world, channeled to James Paget on July 23rd, 1915. I am here, Sir Walter Scott. In a time when men and women were more of the earth than they are now, there lived in the Highlands of Scotland a chieftain who had for his companion a woman of exceptional intelligence and beauty, and who, in her associations with the followers of her husband, took particular interest in showing them the necessity for living lives of morality and virtue. Her husband was a man of less mental acquirements, and of a roughness of character that made him feared as much as she was loved by those over whom her husband exercised control. In the course of time a serious dispute arose between him and the chieftain of a neighboring clan, which finally led to war and bloodshed, and the husband of the woman was captured by the rival chieftain and confined in a castle of great strength, situated in a position almost inaccessible to any who might attempt the rescue of the imprisoned chief. One night, in the shelter of a storm, when the moon and the stars were hidden from the eyes of men, this faithful wife, accompanied by only one devoted servant and maid, started for a castle of the victorious chieftain, in the hope of obtaining the release of her husband by paying a ransom and making entreaties in behalf of him who, she thought, was so dear to her. As she journeyed across the mountains, trusting more in the sureness of her horse's instinct than in her own ability to follow the paths, she encountered some of the followers of her husband's captor, who took possession of her and her companions, and conveyed them to the castle where her husband was imprisoned. She was treated with great respect by these clansmen, and when they arrived at the castle she was received with all the courtesy due to one in her station, and especially to one having the reputation of possessing such excellent qualities of mind and heart. When she came into the presence of the lord of the castle, she was astonished to see that he was a man of such wonderful beauty of face and form, and having a dignity and grace that set off his fine form in a manner that showed his superiority over the chieftains that dwelt in these mountain fastnesses, and over her husband as well. The stranger host was exceedingly kind to her in his salutations, and expressed for her his sympathy that her husband had been taken from her, and that he, the speaker, was by force of circumstances compelled to be the one who had caused her the great grief which the enforced absence of her husband had brought her. And so gracious was he that ere the interview had ended, the wife had nearly forgotten the object of her mission, and was deeply impressed by the unusual attraction of the stranger, and, as a consequence, retired for the night, without making known her desire for her husband's release, or entreating the host to be merciful and let her band depart. After she had entered her chamber, she found that her thoughts were of the attractive and pleasing host more than of her husband, and that her heart felt a sensation that was new to it, and which she did not understand. For it must be that in those days marriages were not so much the result of love as of the desire for position and advancement in the eyes of the people, and especially of those who might be rival for the favor of some chieftain. Well, as I say, a new sensation came into her heart, and, exert herself as she might, she could not drive away from her thoughts the attractiveness and vision of the stranger. As she prayed, the face of this man would come between her and her God, and turn her thoughts from the objects of her devotions to the one whom she had so recently met, and who, as it seemed to her, had enchanted her, and made her almost forget her duty to her husband and the object which had brought her to this place. At last sleep came to her, but with this sleep came dreams that had in them visions of happiness and scenes of pleasure, which she had never experienced in all her waking life, and, strange to her, the principal figure in these scenes was not the man to whom she had plighted her troth, and married and lived with for a few years in comparative happiness, but the gracious chieftain who had received her in his home with such respect and consideration. She nevertheless enjoyed her dreams, and they were as real to her as any of the happenings of her conscious life. In the morning she arose with a new sensation in her heart, and felt as a young bird that had just escaped from its cage into the free air of heaven, and all unconsciously she commenced to hum in a soft and musical tone an old song which, as a young girl, with her heart filled with emotions of love for her unknown hero, she sang while living in the visions of her imagination. But suddenly, as if an echo from the past, came the realization of her mission, and the recollection that her husband was a prisoner, and that she was recreant to her duty in forgetting to make the effort to obtain his release. Her duty called her, and her mind responded, but her heart remained silent, and the thought of her husband's plight could no longer awaken in her bosom the emotions which had accompanied her to his prison house. She ate her breakfast alone, as her host, knowing that under the circumstances it would not be gracious for him to intrude on her, sent his excuses and the information that he would see her after she had finished her breakfast in the reception room of the castle, when she would come with her maid. Her feelings as she ate were strange and conflicting, and she had the thought come to her, if only her host were her husband instead of him whom she had come to rescue. And with this thought came others, and more insinuating, until at last she found herself in a condition of doubt as to whether her husband was her husband in anything more than in name. But at last she recovered her self-composure, and arose from her repast with the determination to throw off the strange influences that had come over her, and to do her duty by her husband, and forget the emotions that had filled her heart both in dreams and while awake. She entered the room where she expected to meet her host, and, as she advanced, he approached to meet her, and in a softness of voice and charm invited her to be seated and make known to him her desires, and to speak with all candor and without fear of not having her requests considered. She then told him the object of her visit, and offered him the ransom which she had brought, and entreated him to release her husband that he might accompany her home. After a short time of silence, the host turned his sympathetic eyes upon her, and with deep feeling said that he could not accept her ransom, neither could he release her husband, as the good and safety of his people depended upon her husband and his followers being deprived of the opportunity to harm the clansmen that he was chieftain of. But upon conditions he would give the husband one chance, which was recognized as honorable between chieftains of equal rank in the settlement of their dispute, that he would waive the fact that her husband was his prisoner, and that under the customs of their clans he had the right to demand and take the life of her husband, as he had forfeited it by engaging in battle, and as a prisoner was not entitled to further consideration. That he made this apparent concession for her sake, and not because her husband was worthy of consideration, as he had not been a man of mercy or kindness, where kindness might have been expected. She remained silent for a moment, and then said, "Why do you offer to do this for my sake? I am a stranger to you, and you saw me for the first time last night. Why you should make this sacrifice and incur the danger of losing your own life, I cannot conceive." He looked at her intently for an instant, and replied, "In this life there are some things which men do without knowing why, and without asking why, but because of influences which come over them, influences not understood. They are compelled to do these things, and in doing them, no matter what the sacrifice, comes a happiness which, though intangible as to its cause, yet is felt and enjoyed. And to me, now, in making this offer and in telling you that only for your sake do I make the sacrifice, comes this influence, and with it a happiness that I know not what it means. I cannot further explain, nor do I know myself why I made this offer, except that some invisible something that is foreign to me causes me to do so, and in doing so, there comes a happiness which is new to me, and which is mine and not another's. And so, madame, I make this offer of giving your husband the opportunity to contest with me in fair combat, and if he be victor, he will be permitted to leave this castle, with you, under safe escort, to the confines of my domain. But she, musing to herself, said, Yes, if he should be the victor, but that would mean this man's death. Alas, I cannot find happiness in that. What strange emotions come over me! The thought of this man's death seems to pierce my inmost soul. He is a stranger to me, and yet my soul seems to know him, and feel his happiness, which he tells me of. Unaccountable soul and mysterious heart, O Spirit of mercy, help me. I cannot consent to this combat, because he might fall. But what is that to me? My husband is mine, and I am his. The world says I am, but my soul says, what does my soul say? Whence came the happiness that the thoughts of this man caused? Whence the joy of the sweet dreams in which this man was the central figure? Whence the dread that he may fall? Tell me, soul, what does it all mean? Am I a traitor to my marriage vows? Am I not the true wife of my husband? And shall I dread that another fall and not he? No, I am a woman, and his wife, and his. No, not his lover, but courage, duty, yours I am. Come and sustain me. And he said, Well, madame, you are silent. Shall it not be as I say? Your husband is more to you than is anyone else, and love and duty demand that he have this chance, and so I see you do. So today we will arrange for the combat, and may the powers of right and truth prevail. And now, madame, I will bid you good morning. When the day was somewhat advanced, the chieftain of the castle directed his retainers to bring before him the prisoner, and when the latter appeared, he calmly stated to him the conditions on which the combat should take place, and asked the prisoner if he would consent to observe the same in the event that he, the prisoner, should be the victor. One of the conditions was that in such event he, the prisoner, would vow that forever thereafter he would not attempt to war upon the people of the lord of the castle, or to take from them their lands, or otherwise molest them. To these terms the prisoner consented, and then they prepared for the decisive struggle which would result in the death of one or both of the combatants. I will not attempt to describe the progress of the fight, but in the end both of the chieftains were slain, and the widow of the dead captive soon prepared to return to her own home and take with her the body of her husband. But before her departure she silently and alone visited the coffin in which lay the body of the owner of the castle, and offered a prayer and shed a tear in memory of him and in memory of the emotions which he had awakened in her soul. She left the place with a feeling in her heart that something, a part of her, had been taken from her, and that never again would it come back. When she arrived at her home, she was welcomed by her family's clansmen with tears of sympathy and love, and vows of loyalty to her as their ruler. Her husband was buried in the castle grounds, and she then retired to her chamber and sought consolation in prayer and meditation. For weeks she continued in her retirement, and thought of the events that had brought her life in contact with that of the dead stranger, and as she thought, there came to her the realization that her soul had been awakened by him in the way of love, and that he was the one that she loved and not her husband. And as she meditated on this awakening, there came to her feelings of happiness that made her wish for his return to life and to her. But soon she realized that these wishes were vain, and there came the thought that, if he could not come to her, she might go to him, as she felt in certain moments of the stillness of the night that there was an invisible presence, which produced in her soul the same strange emotions that she experienced on the evening when she first met him, and when he refused her ransom and her pleadings for the release of her husband. And as the thought of these emotions and the accompanying influences, she wondered what the cause was, and at last there came to her the consciousness that her lost lover must be near her, and with this sensing came yearnings that she might see him and hear his voice again. But to her longings came no response, and hope died within her. Time passed, and the consciousness that her love for the departed stranger was a thing of reality increased in such force as to cause her to become so lonely and heartsick that she prayed to her God that he would hasten the time when she might depart also, and learn the place where her lover must be. But her prayers were not answered, and she commenced to droop and lose her vitality, and her interests in the things of life. Those of her household endeavored to cheer her, and interest her in the things which she theretofore had thought worthy of her care, but to no purpose. And as the days went by, she gradually became more emaciated and listless, and, at last, was compelled to seek her bed, and there remain. No efforts of the physicians could diagnose this condition of languor and intense depression, and the learned men could not discover that she had any physical ailment, and were unable to find a remedy for her disease of mind, which they decided she was suffering from. As she became weaker and more emaciated, her spiritual nature became more refined, and open to the influences which had been with her so often in the moments of her quietude and loneliness. And one night, as she felt the workings of these influences, her soul seemed open to an inflow of love, which took possession of her whole being, and the room appeared to her to be filled with beautiful lights and misty cloud formations, and, suddenly, she heard a voice saying, "My love, I am here, and bring the other half of our soul, and the love that only the united soul can feel and possess." For the moment she was startled, and then looking in the direction from which the voice came, she saw the lights moving together, the misty clouds grow dense and white, and then the face and features of her stranger lover, with such looks of burning love beaming from his eyes, that she, in the ecstasy of her joy, exclaimed, "O my love, come to me, and take me in your arms, and tell me again that I am your other self. I have wanted so long for your coming, and my soul is so weary with its longings." As she ceased her pleadings, the love-lit eyes became dim, the form disappeared, and the spirit voice grew weaker. "My love, I am yours, and must leave you now, but will come again." Darkness again enveloped the room, and she, exhausted but happy, lay back on her pillow and soon sank into a quiet and peaceful sleep, and awakened only with the morning light as it came into her room. The days went by, and her love and longings increased, and the memories of that happy night became a part of her very existence. Her face took on a heavenly look, and her attendants whispered one to the other, "Our Lady has been visited by the angels, and soon she will leave us and become an angel herself." About 10 days after the night described, she felt a most wonderful presence of the influence, which she then knew came from the sole lover of her beloved, and in the evening directed that she be left alone. As the darkness filled the room, she felt stealing through her the sweet emotions of happiness, which came to her with the presence of her loved one, and as she lay on the bed and longed for his appearance, the room became filled with the fleecy, cloud-like formations, and with the beautiful lights, and she knew that he was present, and in her great desire she called, "Love, hurry! I am waiting with a heart almost breaking with love. O my true soul, you are mine and I am yours. Only come and tell me that your soul is mine." As she spoke, the clouds again grew dense, and the lights moved together, and the face and form of her lover appeared, and in a voice of tenderness and love said, "My own true soul, I am yours, and have been through all the eternity of the past, and will be through all the eternity of the future. Love is a thing of divinity itself, and knows no beginning and no ending, and always finds its own. Our love is not of our own creation or willing, for in the long ago, before the earth was, God created our souls to be one perfect one, and there is no power on earth or heaven that can keep us apart. And in the great spirit world, the mated souls never make a mistake as to who their mates are. So you must realize that no marriage on earth and no joining together of a man and woman as husband and wife can separate the soul from its true mate. You are mine now. You always were mine, and always will be the greatest of all the natural loves. Even the mother's love in the spirit world becomes less and less, and at last be absorbed in a greater love. But the love of the soulmate never dies, and as eternity continues, this love increases and grows purer and holier. So then, my other half, my true love, know that you are mine and I am yours, in a love a little lower than the divine love, for all eternity. I must leave you now as my power is waning, but before I go, let me tell you that you will soon be with me in our home of happiness, and be not afraid of your passing, for it is merely the entrance into the real life, and know that I will be at your bedside as your spirit leaves your body, and will enfold you in my arms, and whisper words of love and cheer. Again the room became dark, and she, steeped in the luxury of tears, sobbing, breathed, "O soul, how can I tell you the joy of this night? O night, I will never forget the happiness that you give me, nor the love that comes to me from my own true soulmate. He is mine, and I am his. Soon I will be with him, and no more longings, no more partings, no more two, but one." Sobbing, she gradually sank into sleep, and all was darkness and silence again. In the stillness of the night she passed over, and as her spirit departed, the beautiful lights again filled the room. The fleecy clouds became dense and luminous, and in them appeared the faces and forms of not one but two beautiful spirits, and he with looks of ineffable love shining from his eyes, and his arms enfolding her close to him, bearing her upward, and inspiring words of love in a voice unspeakably tender, said, "Home is yonder." Signed, Sir Walter Scott.